This is Dorie Clark, and I am here on behalf of Newsweek. I'm so excited for this week's guest. I'm here with Robert Herjavec of ABC's Shark Tank. Robert is the author. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Dorie. Thank you for having me in
So
your
great to
virtual
have you.
world.
Oh, thank you. Robert is the author of a book, You Don't Have to Be a Shark, although he is, Creating Your Own Success. And if you are interested in tuning in and joining us, we are going to be taking your questions throughout our time together. So please let us know who you are. Type into the chat box where you're calling in from. We want to see who everybody is. And we are going to be talking today about how your business can thrive during the pandemic. So, Robert, my first question for you, just off the top, I mean, we know that this year with COVID has been so stressful, so disruptive for so many businesses. What would be your top piece of advice for companies or business leaders that may be struggling during this period? What do you think is most important in helping businesses survive so that hopefully 2021 can turn over a new leaf?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to have a very clear sense of reality. When COVID first hit, there was a lot of, oh, we're going to get through this, don't lay anybody off, don't cut costs, blah, blah, blah. And I always think that's really dangerous. You've got to assess what your personal situation is in your business. I know even for us, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if our customers were going to go away, how things were going to be affected. So I actually had my CFO make a black swan forecast, which was no new customers, none of our existing customers paying us. How long could we survive? And once I had that, I was able to come back from the edge. But I think there's no time to have a false sense of optimism. I mean, it also doesn't mean be super negative, just be realistic because you don't know what's going to happen. Having said all that, I do think it's a great time to start a business because you have one quality today that you typically don't have in a good economy, which is reality from your customers. When businesses are struggling, they don't waste time. So if they're not going to buy from you, they're going to tell you right away. And most businesses fail not for lack of opportunity, but for lack of clarity for real opportunity.
Robert, thank you. That's terrific and makes a ton of sense. And we are here with Robert Herjavec. We're talking about how to thrive in your business during COVID. We want to welcome some of the wonderful guests who are here from around the world. We have Soledad from Argentina, Travis from Spokane, Liz from New York. We have Illinois, Chapel Hill, Chicago, Atlanta. We have Sophia from Greece. We have Alan from West Cork, Ireland, Sarah from Egypt, everybody. So we're so happy to have you here. And please feel free to type your questions into the chat box for Robert. Now, Robert, I know that one of the big themes that you have talked about a lot is the importance, especially during this time, of employee recognition and really making sure that the people who work in your business are feeling appreciated, which so often can go out the window when we're in the midst of a crisis. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that has sort of played out in your own life, in your own business?
Yeah, so Dorie, I have 350 employees. I haven't seen a single person from my company since February 17th. Our offices are closed. We can't get together. Most of the countries we operate in are in quarantine. So when it first happened, we're all on Zoom. It was like, rah, rah, yay, this is great. Zoom call after Zoom call, me telling people, you're important, you're important. I mean, it just gets a little bit old. And especially in tech, our greatest asset is our employees, by far. We don't own trucks, we don't own factories. We have people and we have partners. And the number one thing, especially when we can't get together, is how do we stay connected? So we've been trying to find creative ways to do that. And, we'd buy like a coffee card from Starbucks. Then we realized, oh, hang on, Starbucks aren't open. What, and it's very individual. And we came across Bake Me a Wish, which was phenomenal. And I got to tell you, we bought one for every one of our employees. We sent it to their house. I sent it to my house. And something magical happens when you get it. The packaging is incredible, but you put it on your kitchen table. I send you a coffee cart. What do? You put it in your study. I send you this, you put it on your kitchen table, and then your significant other says, "Oh my gosh, that's so pretty. What is it?" And we found it was a very engaging type of gift and thoughtful. And whenever you can engage the entire family, I just think that goes so much farther than individual gift. And recognition is always great.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Your people, your talented people, actually sent me a Bake Me a Wish, which was delicious. So thank you very much for that. That was a lot of fun to receive. And you're absolutely right, of course, that during this time you can't thank and recognize employees enough. And so,
Yeah,
Robert,
Dorie, when the first thing happened, my employees were all scared, like everybody else, and they all called. We had a big hands-on call with everybody, and they said, "What should we do first?" And exactly to your point, Dorie, the first piece of advice I gave our whole company was, once you get off this call, I want you to pick up the phone and call a customer, because those people are scared. I know you're scared, but those people are scared. Just reach out. Even though we're all virtual, I think that human contact is actually at a premium. I think if we've learned anything during COVID, is we are highly interconnected social creatures, and you've got to continue to do that.
That's so true. And one of the great strengths of doing a live stream like this is seeing the wonderful people who are logged in here. We have Jeannie from Oregon. We have let's see, we have a LinkedIn user from Seoul, Korea, Michael from Canada, Jerry from Toronto, Fabian from Buenos Aires. So glad to have you here. And a question came in for you, Robert, where Fabian wants to know, is post-COVID entrepreneurship going to be focused on short-termism? I know one of the things that you have talked about a lot is the importance of really developing and thinking about long-term growth strategies. And that can feel pretty far away during these circumstances. How do you actually balance the short and long-term during these times?
Yeah, I always believe you got to have a long-term vision, and you have to try to build something sustainable for the long term. Most people, though, when I tell them that, don't understand that. What they think that means is use the long term as an excuse for short-term failure. And I'm like, no. Just because you have a long-term vision doesn't excuse you from having a monthly target and a quarterly target and an annual target. So have a long-term vision, but expect short-term performance. There is no lack of excuse, especially during COVID or even post-COVID, for lack of performance. Execution is always the key.
That's a really important point, because I think so often in entrepreneurship or the business world, if things aren't going well, there is a tendency sometimes for people to fall back on excuses. And so we really have to just get real with ourselves. So I love that.
When I'm buying a business and I sit down with the owner of that business, one of the trap questions I ask them is, tell me about your goals. And, they usually go into these really long-term goals. And then I pivot and I say, well, tell me your target for next year. What I want to hear is a very specific number with very specific tangible targets. What I don't want to hear is, well, we'll just do the best we can. You know what? We'll do the best we can. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, X-nay. That person is not a realist.
Such an interesting point. Great rule of thumb. And speaking of rules of thumb, Anna has a question for you. And please, everyone who's tuning in, please type your questions for Robert into the chat box. We'd love to hear them. Anna wants to know, is there a rule of thumb to recognize when it's time that your entrepreneurial resilience should come to an end? If you are hitting a lot of walls, how do you actually tell if you should push through them, Robert, or maybe it might be time to give up?
So in general, when you run out of money. So I think that answer is really dependent on your personal situation. And the reality of life is you don't have unlimited time. Performance is not measured over unlimited amounts of time. A football game has quarters, it has a stopwatch. I mean, there's everything in life that's hard is measured in time. And so if you have unlimited funds and your parents are super wealthy and they're going to keep writing checks, and you want to be the best sushi restaurant in California and you've been in business for 5 years and you have no sales, hallelujah, keep going if you're passionate about it. But I think you've got to measure it against reality. And, for me, every business I started, I always kind of had this time frame. How long can I go until it really begins to impact my family and becomes dangerous? Because I love my business, but I love my family more. And I never wanted to put them at risk.
Thank you for that, Robert. That's a very helpful guide, I think, for a lot of us. And for all of you tuning in, if you are enjoying this conversation, please hit like and please hit share so that your friends and colleagues on LinkedIn or your platform of choice can see the interview and benefit from learning from Robert as well. So, Robert, we hear a lot these days in the COVID world about the new normal, whatever that means. And Jason had a question. He's curious, what new normals do you see continuing in business in general, or in your particular business moving forward? What are the changes that you feel like will actually take root more permanently?
Yeah, Jason, thanks for that question. We talk about this a lot. The first thing is, I think that some things will go back to as they've always been, but some things, to your point, have changed forever. So the first thing that's changed forever is business travel. The idea of going to see a customer I've never met to pitch them on me or my product for the first time is gone. This concept of, well, hey, I happen to be in Chicago, let me pop in and tell you about our company, that's gone. And what changed it was the customers. I mean, we never had to go visit. I mean, think about the time waste for me to go and pitch you my business when I could have done it over Zoom. So that's gone. The idea of going out to take a customer, an existing customer, for dinner or lunch to build those relationships, I think that continues because we're social beings and we want to continue to do that. So I think that's changed forever. I think the speed of business has accelerated forever. Things move fast. Like, people are not patient. You know why we're not patient? Because we're all in front of a computer all day. Like, if I email somebody at 4:00, I expect them to answer me by 4:01. If they answer me at like 5, I'm like, were you not home? Where were you? You have nowhere to go. Answer my email. I think that changes. But the big change is the digital acceleration. If you don't have an online strategy, like in the past, it was like, we have a retail strategy and we have a digital strategy, and Bob, there is no retail strategy. The retail strategy is simply there to support your digital strategy as opposed to vice versa. So the acceleration digital, and then obviously everything that goes around that, remote access, cybersecurity, all those kind of things.
Thank you, Robert. That's great. And so, of course, I want to make sure to talk a little bit about Shark Tank, which is how many of the folks tuning in probably know you from. Of course, you were on Dragon's Den in Canada before that. One exciting shout out and a very good reason for everyone watching this right now to tune in to Shark Tank tomorrow, Friday, is that actually a friend of mine and someone who is in a course that I run, the Recognized Expert course. You can actually learn about it here at dorieclark.com/Rex. She is appearing on Shark Tank on this Friday. We'll have to tune in to see how she does. Her name is Sarah Apgar from Fit Fighter.
Oh, yes. What a great product that was. I remember it. I thought for a moment you were talking about Barbara, and I was hoping that Barbara actually went and got some actual business training.
Oh my goodness. Well, we will all have to tune in so we can see a little bit more about
She was
Barbara.
the fire person, right? That made
Yes,
the thing. I can't
that's
tell you what
exactly.
happens, but
And
great product.
she has been mum. All Sarah Apgar has told us is that we must tune in on Friday to see what happens with Fit Fighter, but it's very exciting. And so to that point, Robert, I am curious. Obviously, the reason you were chosen for Dragon's Den, the reason you were chosen to be a lead shark on Shark Tank is that you yourself are a successful entrepreneur. But I imagine you have probably learned a lot in the spirit of pattern recognition over time from seeing so many businesses. What are the chief lessons that you have learned, the kind of heuristics about how to spot quickly what kind of businesses will be successful and what will not through your experience on Shark Tank?
Wow, Dorie, that was so well asked. But you're dead on. And by the way, we sharks sit around talk about this. And here's what we've learned. So the show is absolutely real. When the doors open, we've never met the people. We know nothing about them. We don't even know the name of their business. Like, we literally know nothing. The first question is always, what's your name? What are you looking for? And the average pitch is over an hour, and it gets edited into 7 minutes that people see at home. So it's very, very real. But here's the funny thing is 50% of the time, we've made up our mind in the first couple of minutes. By the time the doors open, you walk out, you stand there, and the first few things you say, you haven't even told me about your business. And 50% of the time, we've made up our mind. And it goes back to, you always invest in the entrepreneur. This is the thing that people who haven't started a business don't realize. They spend years trying to find and perfect the perfect product. But in business, it's execution. What you start doing often in business isn't what you end up doing. Your business changes. There's ebb, there's flow. And you want an entrepreneur that can adapt and pivot and bring on a great team to support them. And I think that's the very first thing. After we learn about the business, it's knowing your numbers. Numbers in business are the language of business. If you can't speak business, you're going to really struggle. And sometimes people say, oh, I don't really. We say, well, what are your cost of goods? What's your margin on that product? And people are like, oh, I don't really know that, but I'm going to hire somebody to help me with that. And we're like, yeah, stay away from that person with a 10-foot pole. You can't outsource responsibility when you're starting out. Yes, you can hire a CFO when you get really big or that kind of stuff. But when you're starting out, Dorie, man, you got to know that. You got to know that to the last dollar.
That's great advice, Robert. Thank you very much. And to that point, we actually had a question come in from Travis. We're going to turn to that in a moment, but I'll just mention before we do, if you want to learn more about Robert and all the great things he's up to, check out his website. It's robertherjavec.com. And if you would like to make sure that you never miss our weekly LinkedIn series, go to my website, dorieclark.com, and you can subscribe for updates so that you will be fully briefed about our amazing guests. So, Robert, the question that came in from Travis is, you mentioned that people are the most valuable asset. So what do you look for when you're hiring? You were mentioning, of course, that when you're vetting entrepreneurs on Shark Tank, you want them to know the numbers. But if you were looking for somebody who would be an employee, let's say at one of your companies, what are the skills that you're canvassing for there?
Gosh, Travis, that is such a great question. And I have to tell you, the one thing I had to learn that I used to mistake all the time. So I'll tell you what I used to look for, which was completely wrong. And hopefully you'll learn from it and not make the same mistake. I used to hire people I liked. I used to sit there and say, do I like this person? And I forget who it was. One of my old bosses gave me this horrible piece of advice that said, never hire somebody that you wouldn't want to sit next to on an intercontinental flight. And for some reason, that was in my head. So I'd be interviewing somebody and I'd say, oh, do I like that person? Can I hang out with them? Now what I've realized is it doesn't matter. A team is not a group of people that necessarily like each other. A high performing team is a group of people that respect each other. I don't need to like you. We don't need to go out for dinner. I don't need to meet your family. I don't need to meet your dog. I mean, all those things are great. And if we get along, that's just icing on the cake. But I have to respect you. And so the first thing I look for is, do you fit in our culture? Not do I like you, but do you fit in our culture? And in our company, we're a highly competitive, highly motivated, highly driven culture. So if you don't want to wake up every day and do a little bit better than the day before, and if our growth doesn't motivate you, you're probably, like if you're just somebody who wants to work a few hours, but your real passion in life is baseball, and your softball team is really your passion in life, you're probably not going to fit with us, because our 350 people are deeply passionate about cybersecurity. And so we look for the cultural fit above everything.
So interesting. I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people. So thank you for that, Robert. Mitch had a great question, which kind of ties in with all of this. Obviously, you are very passionate about the work that you do, that your company does. But what motivates you to get out of bed each morning? Has that changed over time? And how about during the pandemic? Many people, their priorities may have shifted in the past few months. We're curious about how you think about that.
Gosh, Dorie, you have the best listeners. These are great questions. So I'm going to tell you what motivated me pre-COVID. And when I had a little bit of success, I'm just deeply passionate about what our business does. And I want to wake up every day. I think we have an incredible opportunity to become, the best cybersecurity business in the world. We're taking on the biggest companies in the world. I really deeply love what I do. I mean, that's what's driven me for all that time. Now, I'd love to tell you that's what drove me when I started my business. You know what drove me when I started my business? Paying my mortgage. That's what drove me. And, sometimes these entrepreneurs come in, they say, oh, I started my business. I had this real vision and we were going to do this. And I was deeply passionate about it. And I'm sure there are people like that. But I got to tell you, most people that start a business, it's fear and it's need. And my need was somebody fired me. I couldn't get a job in time to make my next mortgage payment. And so when I woke up every day, I'm like, if I don't sell something today, I can't pay my mortgage. And so that was a very clear cause and effect. And so, the business got, but having said that, that only takes you so far. If you start a business to make a buck, you'll only make a few bucks. If you start a business to make a buck, but you find your greatness and your purpose, you'll make far more bucks along the way. Funny thing is, when COVID started, I was so afraid. All that uncertainty, I went right back to, if I don't wake up today, people are going to know I'm scared. They're going to get scared and our business could fail. And I think failure is a really big motivator.
It absolutely is, Robert. And a great question came in from one of our listeners here on LinkedIn, which I think a lot of us are probably wondering about, which is, what are your strategies to keep learning and growing? Especially because, we know you've been on Dancing with the Stars, you're on Shark Tank, now you run your own business. You must be incredibly busy. And so how do you keep learning and growing? And what are you focused on learning right now?
Yeah, I think great leaders are great readers. And I think I'm constantly trying to learn. But life for me isn't about learning big things. Like, I don't have to learn Spanish. Like, I can learn how something works. And I find that deeply fascinating. Like, I am a creature that's starved for knowledge. And I find everything in life fascinating. I really do. My mom had this quote that said, you can lead your life in one of two ways. Either everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle. And I truly believe that. Like, I wake up every day and I think it's a miracle and I'm excited and I want to get going. And yeah, I have crappy days like everybody else, but what I've learned is nobody cares. On those crappy days, if my customer calls me and says, "Hey, Robert, how are you doing?" You know what I say? I say, "I'm wonderful." Because what's the alternative? Like, people, when you sell your company and you sell yourself, the first thing you should always sell is joy. People's lives are very hard. You don't know what someone's going through. When they ask you how you're doing, they don't really care. What they don't want is they don't want you to be a burden. And so I just think that we're living in such a fascinating time, and we're all sharing this experience together. That has never happened in my lifetime. There's been recessions, but if you were in banking, it didn't affect you. If you're in no matter who you are, what business you're in, you're affected by COVID. And I think it's a great opportunity when we have that shared community to learn from that.
That's very true. Thank you, Robert. And as we're winding down in our last few minutes, just a reminder to our viewers that if you are enjoying this conversation, hit the like button, hit the share button so that others can also learn from Robert's wisdom. So you mentioned that during this pandemic, the effects have been so much more widespread than anything else we've ever seen in our lifetime. And one of the key challenges for a lot of people I know is really thinking about work-life balance. And so we have a LinkedIn user who had a question for you. How do you balance your work-life balance? How do you think about that and actually make time for strategy, which we know is so important, and yet so many of us fail to do it?
Yeah, I think one of the great things about being an entrepreneur is not that you work less. That's another thing. All my friends who've never started a business always say, "Oh, I wish I could start my own business so I could work on my own schedule." And I'm like, that's such crap. You work at your customer's schedule. But I think one of the things that people don't do enough is spend the time to think. And I find that business is a contact sport. And when the game starts, it's on. So I'm sitting here, I'm doing this interview with you. After this, I have a virtual meeting with my production team. And then I have another thing. Like, when you're playing the game, you can't think about the game. When you're in the middle of the fight, you can't start thinking about strategy. You're just fighting. So what I've had to do is find those moments of stillness in my day in order to be able to do that. And for me, it's waking up early. So I wake up every day at 4:30. The first half hour is a cup of coffee and just thinking. I have a pad of paper in front of me, and for that first half hour, I just write down strategically the things I need to accomplish today. Because I've learned once the day begins and the fight starts, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to accomplish. I'm just reacting.
I think that's such a powerful note to end on. Robert, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. Just as a reminder to our readers and to our viewers, if you'd like to learn more about Robert and his terrific work, you can check out his website here. And you can also, of course, check out his book, You Don't Have to Be a Shark, Creating Your Own Success. And if you'd like to make sure you never miss an episode of Newsweek's Better, you can learn more and sign up for updates at dorieclark.com. Robert, it has been a joy having you here.
Thank you for having me, Dorie.
Thank you, and take care, everyone.